Hello, sweet viewers. I'm Christine with Kimbap TV, empowering you to live a happier and safer life, especially if you're a fellow survivor of domestic violence. Today, I want to introduce you to a new friend. She's a fellow DV survivor all the way from Syracuse, New York. Let's get started. Hi, how are you, ArDenay?
Hi, how are you?
Good. So ArDenay Garner is joining me today, and ArDenay, you just found me through my YouTube videos.
It felt like a divine intervention because when you were talking about you wanted to normalize the conversation around domestic violence, I was like, that is incredible because I have aspirations to do the exact same thing. So I really believe that that was a divine intervention.
Well, ArDenay, tell me a little bit about your journey.
I have to take you back to when I was actually 17 years old, just graduated from high school. And while most people are thinking about their careers and their futures, I was actually thinking about, I'm going to go away to college to find my husband. Like that was my goal. The summer before I entered college, I met my significant other, whom we will just say is nameless. His name is nameless. And he wooed me. You know, I was 17 years old and he was very mature. He introduced himself as a 21-year-old at the time, and his intellect and his lifestyle was just very different from what I was used to. And so I was just attracted to him like a magnet. I went to school together and he continued to woo me. And then lo and behold, we had intercourse. And by that time I was like, okay, this is my husband. He was my first. I'm going to marry him. You know, I'm calling him husband. He's calling me wifey. And then a thing happened while we were at my dorm. His driver's license fell out of his pocket and his name was different than what he told me. And so wasn't his birth year. So I questioned him about that because his birth year had him at 24 years old and not 21. And his name was totally different than what he was going by. So that was probably the first indicator that something wasn't right. But, you know, he gave me some sob excuse and I went with that. And by this time I had fallen deeply in love. Like I'm in love. Whatever he wants, he can have. You know, he was my first everything. Shortly after I started college, I was pregnant. I dropped out of college. We moved from Syracuse to Atlanta, Georgia. And that's where I like to say that I became an adult woman because that's when I was away from my family and I had to grow in every way imaginable. My son was 5 months old and we were driving from probably a Lowe's or a Home Depot in a pickup truck. I remember this day as if it was yesterday. And I can't remember what I said as I was the passenger holding my 5-month-old son in the front seat. But whatever I said, it triggered him and he punched me in the side of my face. Now this is happening while I'm holding my 5-month-old and we're driving like 65 miles an hour down a highway in Atlanta, Georgia. So that was the first physical assault. And there was nothing that I could do because I had to hold my child. He wasn't in the car seat. I don't even know if you needed car seats was mandatory at that time. So I couldn't do anything but to continue to sit there and be quiet because I felt at that moment if I had said anything, it would have just escalated and we could have gotten to a terrible accident. Probably a couple of nights after that, there were some more arguments and then I felt like I needed to flee the situation because it was very volatile. And the thing is, I had no family. So if anything would have happened to me, no one would have noticed because I was down there with him alone, no friends, no family. We had just moved down there. So I left. I had a credit card, probably had like $500 on my credit card at the time. I'm 19 years old, no job, totally dependent on him, no family, no friends. And I said, I'll stay in a hotel for a couple of nights. And I did that until the credit card ran out. And so after that, I had to go back home to him. And we tried to work it out. You know, I'm young and everybody deserves a second chance. And so we tried to work it out. But then he was easily triggered. And I realized now that there was some insecurities that really had nothing to do with me. It was just, you know, a human being. He had some insecurities and he would project those insecurities on me as if I was the source of, you know, whatever was going on internally. He'd have these emotional outbursts He'd make these threats. He would intimidate me. I didn't have an income, so I totally relied on him. And I felt like I was always walking on eggshells because any moment he could just be triggered. You know, I could say something or I could look a certain way. He wanted me to dress a certain way so that men weren't attracted to me. I couldn't have conversations with men because he felt that they would only want me for sex, you know, while he was having all these conversations with women in the name of business. So I was very isolated. And during that time, I didn't communicate much with my family because I didn't want them to worry. And I was still trying to figure it out. Like I'm thinking like, okay, you know, he says he loves me. We love each other. I'm sure he was upset, but I'm sure he'll get over it. Maybe we can get through this. You know, this is his child also. So I know he wants to be in his child's life. Needless to say, Christine, there was 10 years where we would go back and forth and we would move from one apartment complex to another. I was verbally abused on a daily basis, physically abused probably out of the 10-year span, maybe 5 times, but each time was progressively significant in the abuse. And while I was going through the abuse, to be honest, I didn't even recognize it as abuse. Like I didn't recognize myself, oh, I'm a domestic violence victim. I just realized, okay, this guy that says he loves me, when he gets upset, he gets over emotional and he hits on me. But I was a victim of domestic violence, but I didn't realize that until hindsight, like years later after the relationship. I'm like, oh my goodness, I was a victim of domestic violence, physically, emotionally, and somewhat financially because he controlled the finances and he preferred for me not to work, but I still managed to work. I even remember one time we were living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was working at a hotel. I was working for a couple of weeks and he said, well, you know what? If you pay me $50 a week to watch the kids, then I'll be the babysitter. And I'm thinking, excuse me, $50 a week to watch your children? That's what you want me to do? You want me to pay you $50 a week? So I went and quit my job. I'm like, I'm not going to pay my child's father, whom I live with, $50 a week to babysit our children that we birthed together. That's just another example of the financial abuse. And then without an income, he was responsible for paying all my bills. And again, I remember him making a comment. He said, if I had a lot of money, I could get you to lick the walls. And I'm thinking, no, you can't. Like, I'm intelligent, I'm capable, I can make my own money. So regardless of how much money an individual makes, I'm not going to do whatever they ask me to do if I find that is degrading, and I'm not going to lick the walls just because you make a lot of money. The final incident, nameless at the time, was supposed to be going to New York City for a business trip, but the Holy Spirit told me to call a particular hotel and ask for him. And so I called this hotel. Now I'm just listening to the Holy Spirit. I called this hotel randomly and asked to speak with him, and they connected me to a room locally in Syracuse, and he answered the phone. So in that moment, I realized that he had lied about where he was going and that he was more than likely with another woman at a hotel. And the Holy Spirit brought that out to my attention because I had no notion, like if it wasn't for the Holy Spirit saying call the hotel, I wouldn't have thought anything different. I would have thought he was in New York City. He comes home the next day, and I was using the bathroom in our apartment, and he bursts into the bathroom, grabs me up off of the toilet by my neck and starts punching me in my rib cage. And then we go in the bedroom, and basically he forces me to have sex with him. Now, mind you, my young children are downstairs, so I didn't scream. I just complied because I knew I did not want them to be exposed to anything. I wanted to protect them. And he actually, when he was having sex with me, he was saying, you like this, you want me to do this, and this is what you need. Otherwise, you wouldn't act the way that you act. So essentially, you know, it's hard to say that I was raped because it's like you were with this man and he was your quote unquote boyfriend or significant other, but I could not have said, no, please, let's not have sex now. Like, you've already beat me. I didn't want to create a scene. I wanted to let him get it over and then go on about, you know, and figure out the rest later. I knew after that incident that I had to do something. And now I was back in Syracuse with my family, And again, I didn't want to share with my family because, like, if I was to tell my brother, like, it would become a major family feud, and I did not want anybody to go to jail. So I did get a restraining order. After that incident, I had made up in my mind that I needed to do something significant. I needed to make a statement. So I remember reading in one of my daily spiritual devotional books, it said, it was January 17th entry, and it said, you're going to have to do something that you don't want to do, that you know that you have to do for yourself and for all of the women in your family. So in my mindset, I'm thinking like, okay, I got to shoot him. I'm literally thinking like, the Holy Spirit wants me to shoot this man. So Christine, 5 days after that incident, I came up with a plan to withdraw $1,000 out of my bank, go approach any group of guys where I know there's criminal activities, where I suspect I could possibly purchase a gun. The day before I had made this decision, I cleaned out my desk at work. I told a friend of mine in Texas what I was going to do. I was totally fine with going to jail. I wasn't going to shoot him to kill him, but I was going to shoot him to injure him, to let him know you cannot put your hands on women. And this is for I'm setting an example for all of the women in my family, for my daughter, my nieces, everyone who's been a victim of domestic violence. I am going to set an example by shooting him. I was going to shoot him in his leg. So when I had made my peace with that, the morning that I was supposed to do all of this, my vehicle would not start. There was nothing wrong with my car. It was perfectly good. That particular morning, the car would not start. He had to take me to work, which meant I could not go to the bank before I went to work. I could not go to try to purchase a gun after work. Like, my whole plan was interrupted. And I realized that was truly a divine invitation. I read a book, a spiritual book, that made me think I needed to shoot somebody. Obviously, that was not what the book was trying to tell me, to go and shoot somebody, to set an example. I'm sure that's not what the message was. But because I was so irrational, the only way I think the Lord could stop me was to have my car not start. And because of that, it just put a monkey wrench in my plan. And my sister later told me, she said, do you realize if you have taken $1,000 and approached a group of guys in a high crime known area, you could have been mugged. They could have thought you were the police. You could have been killed. Like, a number of things could have happened to you when you were trying to get a gun. So I thank the Lord that happened. And then I calmed down. And so I was able to strategically escape the situation. So, every day I would take some of my personal belongings and give them to my girlfriend who lived a couple doors down from me. And once I got enough of my personal belongings out of the house, then I decided to leave. And then after I was out, me and the kids were out, I called him and said, you know what? I'm ending the relationship. It's over. My brother and my cousin are going to come pick up my furniture. And that is essentially how I left that 10-year tumultuous relationship.
Yeah, good for you. I'm sure that must have been so difficult, especially after 10 years and after 2 children and after, trying so hard to work it out, and after, him being your first everything, like you said. My story is not exactly the same, but I see so many parallels. I see so many things that you've experienced that I've also experienced. And you gave me a copy of your book, and it took you 7 years, you said, to write Divine Invitations of 7 Spiritual Lessons of Relationships. And I got to know you so well, but I also admired how vulnerable and how transparent you were about really every aspect of your life. And, there's stuff in there that I resonate with that I'm still not comfortable talking about publicly. What gave you that courage to want to spell out everything that happened to you, to have anyone and everyone read?
So when I was writing it, and it was also a way of me processing a lot of the pain and the hurt too, because I would write and then I would cry and boo-hoo, and then it would be painful. And so it was an experience of me going at a deeper level of my healing. But when it got to certain pieces that I shared and that I'm willing to share with strangers, I wasn't always willing to share that, but the Holy Spirit said, the fact that you don't want to share it is the reason why I need you to share it. Because in sharing that, you're going to help so many people, and you're going to draw them closer so that they can have a personal relationship with me. So I realized that me being transparent and vulnerable is really a part of my ministry and me bringing people closer to God. But I wasn't open like, oh, I want to tell all, because I was like, yeah, I'm not writing that. I'm not going to say that. And again, because of my personal relationship with the Holy Spirit, the things that I wanted to hold back, it was like, if you don't share that, then you will stay stuck in the pain and the hurt. And so by you releasing this, it's allowing you to become more freer. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm on board. But it was a process, because I am married now also. And I was concerned about my husband and when he reads the book and what is he going to think, but I didn't know that he was reading it all along. So like when I finished it and sent it to my editor, he had a copy, he read the whole book, he gave me his blessings. And that's when I knew if he's okay with it, then I'm good.
Can you describe a little bit about what your book is about?
It's about 7 lessons I learned in significant relationships with men and God. And I have renamed the significant influencers by a spiritual principle. So for example, there's 7 principles in there: forgiveness, passion, unconditional love, honesty, trust, faith, and courage. And in each one of those chapters, I talk about the individual who introduced me to the spiritual lesson. And then I talk about the lesson learned, and I wrap up the end of the chapter with 7 strategies, 7 tips, 7 steps you can use to support you in exercising or practicing that spiritual principle, if you will. And it's a compilation of a 14-year journal that I was keeping. A lot of times when I write in my journal, it's me processing pain and hurt or something I'm reflecting on. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I take these reflections and make them meaningful so that they can help someone else? And if one other person can benefit from my story, then it's worth it. It's not like a depressing book where you're going to be crying and I talk about me being a victim. No, I tell it in a humorous fashion. There's a couple exotic dancers who have inspired my significant lessons. So I talk about them, and I talk about me being a part of Intervisions Institute for Spiritual Development, which is under the guidance of Iyanla Van Zant. She's a spiritual life coach, and I was in her program for about 2 years. And it helped me heal on so many levels. And so I figured, why not put all of that in a book so that some people can take pieces of this story, pieces of what I share, some of the resources I share at the end of the book, and use it to their own benefit. And then who knows, maybe they will then be inspired to go do something and help someone else.
You started off your book with a chapter on forgiveness. It's such a hard thing for me. You decided to name your abuser forgiveness. And that's the main lesson that you learned from that experience.
He taught me forgiveness. And of course, I was angry. Like, I was extremely angry of the fact that I was now a single mother. I was raised in a 2-parent household. My parents were married for 60 years before my mom passed away. And so even in ending the relationship, I felt guilty because I'm like, now my children have a broken home. And while it's very common, I didn't see myself in that situation. So in the beginning, I was very, very angry. And then on top of that, you abused me, and then you made me, I can't say that he made me because I chose the feelings, but because of the experience, I felt a certain way about myself. Like, you know, he would tell me all the time, no one is going to want you with your 2 kids. He would try to break me down, and then he would try to change the way that I dress because I like to dress up. I mean, even if we're going to dinner at a Red Lobster, I like to dress up. And he was like, oh, no, you shouldn't. You don't want to dress up like that. And why do you want to look? I'm like, why wouldn't you want your woman to look nice? So all of these things he did to break me down. And now I'm single. So I'm single, haven't had any conversations with men because I've been with him since I was 17 years old. And now I am 27 and I'm out here starting as if I'm a 17-year-old. So angry, bitter. But what I realized is that being angry and bitter was only hurting me because I would hear how he's moved on. He was dating this woman. He was in New York City. It was as if he didn't have these kids by me. And I doubted that he was feeling the same emotional dissatisfaction that I was feeling. And I'm like, so I'm sitting here festering in anger and hate while he's having his best life. So I was like, I got to do something to change that because I'm not going to get anywhere fast. And so the first book that I read, and it was by Marianne Williamson, it was called A Return to Love. She talked about forgiveness. In one of the chapters, it said, write a letter to someone you feel you need to forgive to release that. And I did that exercise. And I tell you, it was a freeing exercise because it wasn't about him. It wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about cleansing my soul so that I could move on and stop harboring in those ill feelings, because it was just stunting my own growth, because he really was living his best life.
Well, I mean, it seems like you're living your best life now. I mean, you said you found a husband who truly accepts you for who you are. How did you meet your husband?
I like to talk about my husband. He's my divine mate. I was working for a major corporation here in Syracuse, and they were going to do a joint venture and merge with another company. And so I had been with the company probably for about 8 years, and they gave employees the opportunity to stay with the old company or move with the joint venture. So when I heard that they were moving and I get to choose, I was like, oh my goodness, I think I should go, because again, I might find my husband. I was always, always motivated by getting in a long-term relationship and finding a man. I don't know what was wrong with me, but that's what it was. So I was like, well, yeah, of course I'll go, because my husband is probably there. 3 months after we had moved to our new location, I was at my desk, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon, and the Holy Spirit said, now would be a good time to take a break. And I'm thinking like, well, I'm in the groove of what I'm doing. So the voice got more intense. It was like, now would be a good time to take a break. Go get your granola bar out of the vending machine. So I did that. And as I was walking out of my office door, I seen this gentleman on the phone. He was the first Black man that I saw on the campus in 3 months. So I was delighted to see him, because for a while I thought I was the only Black person working on the campus. I went outside to sit at the picnic table, and then he comes and sits across from me at the picnic table talking on the phone. And I'm like, out of all the space in this field, why is he sitting across from me and he's on the telephone? So I was slightly annoyed. But then after the phone call ended, we started talking. We exchanged phone numbers, and we said that we'd like to get together and have lunch together one day. And so that happened on April 30th. I did not see him again for another 2 months. I'm thinking like, what? I'm like, did he leave the campus? Did he lose his job? Was he no longer interested? 2 months, I didn't see him. And it wasn't until June when I saw him again. And he said that he had lost my phone number. He tried to get my name from my colleagues, but they wouldn't even tell him they knew who I was, because they didn't know if he was a stalker. And so this time around, when I saw him, I immediately gave him my personal number. We set up a date to have lunch on campus, and we walked around the building. We had great conversation. 7 years later, we decided to get married. See the number 7? 7 years to write a book, 7 years dating my divine mate. But he really is God sent. He is a beautiful spirit. He's my prayer warrior. He's my companion. He's so helpful in helping me care for my father. He's just a genuine spirit, and he's totally accepting of me and all of my stuff. And he really is a great guy, which is why I call him Courage in the book. I call him Courage because when I met him, I was able to be myself without worrying about any judgment, without worrying about any rejection, without worrying about whether he's going to approve or disapprove. Like, I was just able to be myself, and I had the courage to be free and be all of who I am. And he endorsed that. He supported that. And while we are definitely opposite in some ways, we complement each other very well.
What a lovely story. Thanks so much for sharing that. The last thing I read on your book, you said, as long as you have breath, you have an opportunity to make another choice to conquer your circumstances and live a purpose-driven life. I wrote it down because I loved it so much, and I totally relate to what you're saying. And so, on that note, what do you want to share with fellow survivors, who may not be feeling very encouraged right now, or who may be in the beginning steps of recovering from whatever it is, that happened to them?
I would like to say, I think we all have experiences for a variety of reasons. And our most painful experiences are the ones that are going to shape us and help us become closer with a power that is much more significant than we are. And so what I would like to encourage is, if you are still amongst the living and you have an opportunity to go through an experience, trust the process. And that's easier said than done, because when you are in the thick of it, all you want to do is escape the situation, which is why I encourage people to practice something, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether you are religious or spiritual, you have to have some other support outside of yourself, in my opinion, in order to get through the painful experience of being human. As long as we're breathing, I think it's our obligation to find something valuable in that experience, even when it's painful. Even when it's painful, if you can just find one thing, like something small, come out of this situation. In my book, I talk about the loss of my 17-month-old great nephew. And that was very tragic for us. But I remember holding his lifeless body in my arms, and I said, I don't know what this is about, but I promise you, your life will not be in vain. And I am going to find out what my purpose is, and I'm going to live it out. Because if I did not find something good out of that situation, I don't think I would have been healthy or whole as an individual. And so it just behooved me to find meaning in the meaningless, in the senseless, in the tragedy, and in the trauma. And so I really encourage people, if you are still breathing, that means you still have an opportunity to it only just a little mustard seed of something positive. If it's, well, today he didn't hit me, and I just read a positive quote in a book that says, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to hold on to this for the next 24 hours just to get me through today. Like, if we can find something positive just to get through the moment, and every time we continue to get through the moment, then there is hope on the other side. There really is. And then a lot of times we have to be willing to do the work. And as victims, sometimes, we'll say, well, I was victimized. I was wrong. I was offended. Why do I need to do the work? And my response to that is, because of that experience, that means there's a calling on your life. And when you do the work, you will understand what that calling is. Because I believe anyone can survive a traumatic, tragic experience, then there's a story, there's some strength, there's some purpose in all of that. And the goal is for that individual to figure out what that is.
It seems like you've discovered your purpose of using your experiences to help others. And you said you left your job recently, and so that you can focus 100% of your time and energy on being this person that can be helpful to others.
So I was previously a program director with a school-based program. Absolutely loved the work. But about 9 months ago, I had a conversation with someone, and it made me reflect on, what am I doing? Life is short and tomorrow's not promised. And while I do love what I'm doing, I know there's more for me to do, especially working with adults, because I do believe that people give up on adults because they think because you reached a certain numerical age that you're supposed to have it together. So I had to pray about it. And what the Lord said was, I do want you to resign and there is more work for you to do, but I want you to take 9 months in preparing for it. Very similar to when a woman gives birth to a child, it's a 9-month process. He says, I want you to go through the first trimester, and this is what I want you to do, which is the first 3 months. And then the second trimester, this is what I want you to do. And then in the last trimester, that's when you will announce to your director that you're giving your 90 days notice of resignation. What I was unaware of was that it would be COVID-19 and a pandemic. So I'm like, okay, I had this great plan. I started making moves toward developing my author business. I purchased a publishing contract, was working on my book, submitting it to the editor. I had a plan to save 12 months of my living expenses so that I could focus on promoting the book. And so even if I don't sell one book, I'd be okay for at least 12 months. So I saved all the money, and then the COVID hit, and I'm like, Lord, do you really want me to leave my gainful employment during a pandemic? Because one, I can't do the book tours like I was thinking about, the in-person and connecting with people. That's not going to happen. And I'm really uncertain about the economy. So should I leave a job? And the Holy Spirit said, yes. Like, do you trust me, or do you trust what you see? And he said, if I am the provider of all that is, don't let what's going on in the world prevent you from doing what I've asked you to do. So it really was about obedience. And so in May, I think on May 4th, I announced to my director that I was going to resign. And it was about trusting the process. And when I say that I'm spiritual, I believe that everything happens for a reason, a lesson, or a blessing. It's not outside of those three things. And I have to say, Christine, it's been the best decision that I've made thus far, because I'm a week and a half in and I'm having this interview with you. Like, that has to be a divine setup. And again, I think what I'm doing, I do believe that the Lord is going to utilize me to show other people that they can do the same thing. So it's really not about me. I'm just obeying what he's asked me to do. Because if it was up to me, I would have not quit my job. I mean, that's how I know that I'm not acting on my own ability, because I am fearful. I am worried. But when I know that I'm acting in cohort with the Holy Spirit, there's nothing I worry about. I trust the process and I walk on faith, and I believe that I'm going to be fine no matter what I do, because I'm obeying what he's asked me to do.
That's awesome. So your first book's going to be published in October, right?
October 7th, on my 44th birthday.
This is going to be quite the birthday gift for yourself, right?
It will be, and I'm excited about it. I love the number 7, and so I'm like, what better way to celebrate a birthday than to do my book, like have it officially published and available for the world to purchase on October 7th.
Wow, that's going to be an exciting new chapter for you.
It is. I'm so excited. And the book is available for pre-order now on Amazon. So I'm getting a few pre-orders if people want to purchase the ebook. And again, that ebook will be released, the content will be released on October 7th.
Great. Anything else you want to add or share?
I believe that what we're most passionate about is what drives us. And we have to honor that. And sometimes in honoring our passion, it's not easy, but it's the thing that's going to get us to where we're supposed to be. And so honor your passion and commit to action. And sometimes that means you may have to leave where you're most comfortable. You may have to leave that place. You may have to leave some family and friends. You may have to be alone for a few months or a year or so. But if you're committed to honoring your passion, you'll be okay with it. And if you trust the process, you'll get through it.
Well, thank you, ArDenay, so much for chatting with me. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, could you share it with someone you know and give it a thumbs up? I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel as well and find more videos that can empower you, especially if you're a fellow domestic violence survivor. Take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.